Hey, everybody, thanks for coming out.
Can you guys hear that?
Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me in the back?
Cool.
All right, beautiful. Thank you. Thank everybody for coming out. Thank Isabel Legend for bringing this fair to New York for the first time. I'm Mike Colameco. This is Tony Coturri. You can see when you got the email blurb about the Natural Wine Fair that there was no description about me. It was just picture me standing in front of some graffiti. Okay. So I'm a chef who's been drinking wine all my life. Never taken a wine course in my life, but that's kind of good because that makes me and him the same in that way. But I've got tons of wine friends. I have traveled around for many, many years, filming harvests, traveling to vineyards, befriending vignerons. I'm a huge fan of the industry and a passionate wine drinker, so that's the only credentials that I had, which wasn't something you could really put in a blur. Anyway, it's so great to have Tony here. Just by way of background, so Tony's 37 vintages. So he's been making wine in Sonoma for probably longer than most of you have been alive. And it's kind of hard to imagine. So I came to New York. I grew up in Philadelphia, came to New York in 1982 after I graduated from the CIA. I'm a chef. So that's my backstory, my restaurant backstory. And for all the years I drank wine, which is a long time, I just sort of looked at it as something. It's red, it's white, it's varietal. And it wasn't until maybe 04 or 05 that I began to sort of hear about this natural wine thing. And I was kind of confused at the beginning, like natural as opposed to what? And then you meet Pascaline, and then you meet Alice Firing, and then you start to get into the deep end of the pool and realize that, oh, so prior to big farms, prior to nitrogen, prior to all the fertilizers they use, prior to commercial yeast books, wine had been made a certain way everywhere, by everyone, since forever. That kind of changed in the 40s and 50s when we got into big agro-farming. And it took me a while for my palate. Now, most of you probably didn't have to have this learning curve, but if you've been drinking, you know, I'd argue some great wines, and maybe you can call them commercial to some extent, but like, you know, traditionally made wines your whole life. When I first got to taste natural wines, they kind of threw me because what am I getting off the nose? What are these VAs? What are these breaths? What is this? What's in the glass? What am I drinking? It took a while for me to wrap my head around the fact that this actually was a living thing. And I think the thing that really got me hooked was sitting down again with people like Alice and Pascaline over the course of the night, going through bottle after bottle, and then revisiting like that first bottle an hour and a half later, and how much that wine had changed, and how much that wine had evolved, even from glass to glass within the bottle. And something struck me, like a little aha moment, where these things are alive. And even, I think in the palate, you get that sense. And I don't know what it is. I was here earlier for their talk on terroir, which people say, well, you can't really, you can't taste minerality, technically speaking. They haven't proven it yet, but of course, I'm not sure if any of that's true. I think we're all here because we believe it isn't true. But this guy's amazing. So I want to get to his story as soon as I can. So your parents, you grew up in San Francisco, Bay Area kid. They had a country home in Sonoma. One of your grandparents was a cooper in Italy. And then dad is just kind of like a weekend, get you out of the city in the summers, like family camp thing, said, let's buy this land and have a house and make wine. Correct. That was it. Correct. When did you decide this is what you wanted to do? And when described as Sonoma, have any of you been to Sonoma recently? Right, so you know what it looks like now. Talk to me about what the landscape of Sonoma looked like in the 70s and early 80s, Tony.
Hi, everybody. So Sonoma, I started making wine with my father in 1963. In those days, and this is literally true, if you drank wine, you had a social problem. People, Americans, drank beer and spirits.
He's Italian. I grew up drinking wine in Philly.
Yeah, but that was it. That's why one of the reasons during Prohibition, they allowed people to make 200 gallons of wine per household, because they're really afraid that the ethnic types would revolt and have revolutions in the city. I mean, it's like, this is the way it is. So in the early 60s, we literally were able to get grapes for free. We went up to a vineyard in Asti. My father knew the winemaker there. He was Swiss-Italian like my father was. And he just said, hey, go pick whatever you want. It was a mixed black vineyard. There was Zinfandel, Petite Syrah, Carignan, Alicante, some white grapes, just kind of planted at random. So every year we'd go up and make a particular varietal. We picked out the Zinfandel. In 1964 we picked out the Petite Syrah. And I still have bottles of that alive in my cellar. So, so that's the beginning of it. And then through the 60s, besides the making of the wine, there was also the revolutionary times that we're in. I was 14 years old in 1963, so I grew up in the hippie days. And what we were doing is distilling everything down to the most basic thing. So even in those days, there was chemicals being put in wine, primarily SO2, yeast, maybe a few other things, but not very much. Stripped all that down, let the wine, let the grapes ferment on their own yeast that comes from the vineyard, and see where we went. So I did this for a number of years, experimenting with different varietals, different grapes. But in 1979, we started the commercial winery. 37 years of making wine, no chemicals. The glass of wine in front of you has absolutely nothing added to it. 20 years old, so if there's any question in anybody's mind about the need to add sulfur, SO2 to wine, it's not necessary. If you happen to go to a wine supply store and you look at a bag of sulfur dioxide, it says poison on it, and it's poison. There's a reason for it. It's an antioxidant. When it hits water or hits a liquid, it turns into a gas. It's one of the things that's used in the industry is that gas comes up and fills up any amount of airspace that's in there so the wine doesn't spoil. We're just having a little discussion about, I met an ex-fisherman in Daytona Beach a number of years ago, and he was saying in the Gulf when they're fishing for prawns and shrimp, they put them in the hull of the boat. Guy goes down there and literally pitches SO2 into it, turns into a gas, he gets knocked out. Another guy goes down, another guy goes down, and he's told me that whole crews of a ship were killed by the use of sulfur dioxide. So I mean, it is a real issue, and it's a real issue with me because we're so concerned about pure food right now, and here's conventional wine sitting out there loaded with chemicals, not just SO2. There's 200 legal additives that can be put into wine. The only one that has to be put on the label is SO2. Some of it's as silly as anti-foaming agents. When a winery is filling a big vat, a big stainless steel tank, so the wine doesn't foam up and the operator having to wait for the wine to settle down, anti-foaming agent. And then on the other side, yeast nutrients, which is urea, the same kind of stuff you put on conventional farms to get fertilizer, to get plants to grow. So I mean, we're seeing all these chemicals, and now especially we're coming into a period of a lot of manipulation. There's all kinds of new tools. There's antibiotics that they put in wine to kill off the bacteria. There's a chemical, I don't remember the name of it, that you can put it into a wine and it'll kill everything that's alive in it, and you can't detect it under lab conditions. So that means, and I'm positive that no one in that room is using it, but there's going to be, when the big boys start making natural wine, make the wine without sulfites to a certain point, hit it with that chemical, kill off everything that's alive in it, and you got it. But it's not something that we want. Wine should be part of food, and that's, I mean, when Mondavi started out, wine, food, food, wine. You can't have one without the other. I think it's really part of a person's diet to have a pure natural wine.
What does Sonoma look like when you started? Because this is again,
okay,
now you go there and it's vineyards. Back then it was like apple orchards, and I think wine was like the 4th or 5th crop agricultural.
Okay, so in Sonoma County,
right,
there was lots of apples planted in the western part of the state, whereas it's a little bit too warm where we are. The main thing about it in the 60s, 70s, 80s, that when you went to a vineyard and there was a fella on a tractor, you talked to him, he owned the vineyard. So that now, if you went there and you see somebody on a tractor, they might not even know who owns the vineyard, or let alone what's going on in it. So it's a real fundamental shift in terms of what we're seeing as what we all kind of imagine. And it's so funny, in the early years, Gallo used to have this commercial on television. with the white horse. You remember that one? And so you have this fellow riding a white horse through the vineyard, and it just, it just yells at being natural, but at the same time, the stuff is being very manipulated. I mean, you guys have had such a luxury to taste wines in that room because it's unbelievable what's going on. They've got spinning cones, so a lot of there's this talk, oh, the alcohol levels are too high in California wine. You use a spinning cone, take the alcohol off. Well, there could be volatility in the wine. Let's put it through a centrifuge. And so they can take, the interesting thing, there's no more bad wines, but there's very few good ones.
It's true. I mean, like we talked about, like micro-oxygenation in some parts of France where it was developed because to break down those tannins, you had to use it. And if I tell you how many vineyards I go to where it's there and no one's talking about it. So reverse osmosis is becoming, like, strip the wine of its components and put it back together the way you want it. It's crazy what happens in the world.
Right, so 2008, we had the big fires out in California. It was the drought year, beginning of the drought years. 101, which is the main thoroughfare north and south in California, in a little town called Willits, which is a little bit above Ukiah, the county seat of Mendocino. The Highway 101 was closed for 3 days because of smoke. I mean, that has never happened before, and thank God it'll never happen again. So that smoke laid on those vineyards for weeks at a time, and when the crops were harvested, when the grapes were harvested, obviously it was like liquid smoke was put into the wine. They were able to take that wine, put it through a centrifuge, take that part out that was the smoke, and put it back together again. So the manipulation is just whatever it takes to make a wine, that's what they're going to do. 2012, there was so much rot because of the late rains. Chardonnay was coming into wineries that was as dark as making a red wine. I talked to a young fellow that came to my winery to taste wine. He said, yeah, we were one of those wineries that got these grapes. So what the winery was buying was a varietal, and they were buying an appellation. The grapes were immaterial. He said, we ran it through the lab, and it came out the other end, $12 bottles of Chardonnay. And that's what it's about. When you start getting a commodity, which wine has become, you're going to see all these kinds of things. And as a consumer, you don't have a way of knowing what's going on. That's what's so important about that room. It's the taste of natural wine. It can't be hidden. It can't be changed. It's that the taste of the place, the terroir, is the most important component of the wine. And when you taste natural wines, anywhere you go in the world, you know what they're like.
You keep the mic. So, Alice, Alice wanted to ask you a question. She's not here. So you started making your wine right around the time. I mean, there's this like kind of synchronicity. Is that the word? When Marcel Lapierre first was bringing his wine, his Gamay, his Beaujolais, to Paris with no salt. Over there, it kind of launched a movement. It threw a stone in the water, and those ripples began to spread. You began to see it in Beaujolais. You began to see it in other regions. You began to see it in Sud de France in the 90s, and certainly in the aughts. Loire Valley, but you were like the lone guy. So how did you steer that ship in the beginning? How did you? You're not using irrigation, so you were kind of, everything was stacked up against you. How did you navigate those without having a core of people that could say, oh, we've had this trouble in the past, we've cured it with this? How did you do that?
Well, the interesting thing, I think in Europe and especially Italy and France and Spain, there's a tradition of making wine in a natural way. Yeah. Everybody's grandfather made it that way. So it wasn't such a jump that it wasn't in the New World. And in the early days of distributing this wine, I'd bring it to wine shops in the city, and they were afraid of it because they felt that the bottles would explode and spew biological contamination in their wine shops. Which is like, if you think, oh, that's a great joke, but when you think about how backwards we became, and we don't even trust a natural product. So when I first started marketing these wines, I learned very quickly that I didn't talk about organic. Biodynamics was just like a few years ahead. I didn't talk about not using sulfur. I didn't talk about using native yeast for the fermentation. I just presented the wines as any other wine. And that was one of the things that I was required to do, is to produce wines that looked and smelled to some degree like conventional wine. They couldn't smell like barnyard. They couldn't be, effervescent. They couldn't have cloudiness. They had to have that look. which I appreciate because it really honed my craft as a winemaker. So I would go in and present the wines, and maybe the wine buyer would say, hey, I'll take a couple cases, a couple cases, and I'd say, oh, and by the way, these wines are organically grown, which was a big question in those days because an awful lot of organic produce, a guy would come down with a truck, go to the conventional produce mart, buy the vegetables, and by some strange miracle, it turned into organic. You remember those days. And then I'd have to say, you know, there's no sulfites, natural yeast, and they were startled because here they had a wine that they liked, and then you put this on it. So by and large, they took it, but you know, it took a long time. So at every stop, every place I went was a challenge. You had to really talk your way. You had to really talk to it and talk about it and talk about what things are supposed to taste like and remind them of what their grandfathers did in those days. I mean, I had a problem with my distributor, and you know, they were like getting ready to, this was before I was with Jenny and Francois. There wasn't, Jenny and Francois was 2000.
Yeah, she was super early pioneer.
So I was out there working with conventional distributors, and so they had a meeting. This was a big company that eventually got bought out by Southern, name unknown, but we can talk about that. But anyway, so I
Let's not talk about Southern.
But I got this, that was before, but I was at this big table. And they said, well, Tony, you know, we're having a lot of problems with your wines, and we're thinking about dropping them. So the manager was had an Italian last name. So I looked at him and I said, Bill, what did your grandfather do? And he said, well, and I said, what did your grandfather do? What kind of wines did he? And so I made it through for another day. It wasn't pleasant, but that's what it took. I mean, it was a real struggle, amazingly, because at the same time, there was a whole nother parallel agricultural thing going on with fruits and vegetables and livestock and chickens, organic. Organic was like really starting to work, and people were really excited about it, but it always took time in the wine business.
I'm sure, you know, if you're here at this fair, you're into wine, and I'm sure you probably visited vineyards, whether they're here in the North Fork or maybe the Finger Lakes or maybe in California, wherever we have in North America. But at the heart of it, you look at this guy and you say, you know, vigneron is kind of a fancy word for a farmer. So we get to finished product. When we go to the store, we buy that bottle. We get to talk about it. Let's talk about a year in farming. I just like to hear it, and this could be like a 3-hour question, but give me the cliff notes. But I mean, you've just ended the crush. You've got wine now.
Literally, I finished the crush on Monday, and on a plane Tuesday morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, to fly to Boston, and now I'm here. I mean, it's been a week today that we finished the harvest.
Your fingers are still stained.
Yeah, that was from everything. Wow. I washed my hands.
Yeah, he's not like those guys in the open dock with the Gucci loafers and the Rolexes. They're farmers. But so now, what happens going forward? What's happening? You're not here, but there's work being done in your vineyard. What's the year like?
Associate right now, we're starting to look at the new wines. We're looking at making or putting together a nouveau. So when I get back, we're going to start blending. We made like Carignan 3 different ways. We made Syrah 3 different ways. Zinfandel was straightforward. Petit Syrah straightforward. And we're looking to put different components together to get a wine that's literally 3 months old on the market. And the interesting kind of fun thing about that is that those grapes have more influence still from the vine than they do from the winery. You know, because they've only been with us for 6 weeks. So that's one of the. I was talking to a reporter, and they said, "Oh, you guys are doing nouveau, so you can get cash flow, right?" I said, "Well, you know, that's true, but also think about this: that when those people taste, when that wine comes to New York, you'll know what the vintage was like. What was the sun like? What was the rain like? What's the dirt like?" And that's why the French have celebrations when those wines come into town, because everybody can't live on the farm anymore. But there they are. Here it is. Here it is. You know, have joy about the harvest. I mean, November 12th is really Thanksgiving for Nouveau, and that's what it is. It's Thanksgiving for the vintage. So at this time of year, things are quieting down. We won't be starting to prune until it gets cold around the end of December, beginning of January, and then it's interesting in that when you look at conventional agriculture and organic, properly done organic and biodynamic, all the work the sowing of the cover crops is going in now. If you're putting compost down, if you're putting oyster shell down, you do it this time of year so that it becomes available to the vines in the spring. And what do conventional farmers do? They put all the stuff in the spring. Lovely, that's what you're supposed to do, right? And it doesn't become available until September, and the vines are already starting to go into dormancy. So a lot of what we're seeing is just having common sense. I mean, it isn't like, this is like all new stuff and we're getting information from God knows where. This is the stuff that people have always done. I mean, and then the guiding light with what we're doing and a lot of work in California is biodynamics. Rudolf Steiner's introduction. And what was that about? And you mentioned it briefly. Coming out of the First World War, there was a lot of nitrates left over from the production of ammunition. And so farmers started putting those nitrates on their ground, and the plants grew like crazy. Oh man, this is it. And then 3 years later, collapsed. So they went to Steiner and said, hey, what's going on? And it would be easy for him to just say, well, obviously you guys got away from the way you're doing things and it's time to get back to it. But he took a much longer range look at it into what's called clairvoyance to the past. He went to that time when humans went from being hunters and gatherers to agrarians. And that instinct of being in tune with nature is what really is the way to come out of using chemicals, not stop using them. I mean, I always kind of compare it to your musician. If you learn to play the guitar, you can't sit there thinking about the notes. You cut this part of your body off and you play from the heart. And that's what Steiner talks about. There's one passage in his book, he said the mind should be in the back of a chauffeur-driven car and the heart is the driver. And the mind just observes what's going on, pays attention to what's going on. I have a friend that's a really good farmer, and he said, Tony, you're getting into wine. How do you know when to pick the grapes? How do you know when to do all these things? I said, Grady, the same thing with your crops. They talk to you in the middle of the night. Your cooking talks to you. You don't have to say, well, what's this, what this? You know, it talks. And once you start hearing that, whatever you do, that's when you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, when it's talking to you, not you're trying to, and that's the big thing about all this stuff, is you're not trying to guide it through, you're just trying to make sure that like being a shepherd, you don't push the sheep around, but you kind of gather them up. So there's no such thing as a winemaker. I can't make wine. You can't make wine. You can shepherd it, you can be a custodian, and that's what I tell them. I'm a custodian at a winery.
A couple of years back, I had a great opportunity. I had a lunch with I was in Alsace with Unbrecht and the team with Just Meyer, and they were talking about more or less the same idea. They put a same idea with a slightly different description. And I thought it was brilliant. It was talking about they've been bio. The influence of Germany on Alsace is there. So a lot of those vineyards have been bio since the late '90s. We've been going on 20 plus years now. And he said, the difference is like when every vintage we look at, it's like sailing with a boat at sea. Every time you go out, it's a little bit different. Which way's the current running? Which way's the wind blowing? There are no two seasons that are alike. And as bio farmers, that's what we're attuned to, is that sense of vineyard health, how every year is different, how the rain's going to be different, how the winter was different, how the heat's going to be different, and we steer it. It's like kind of improvisational farming, because that's the only way we can do it.
Right.
It's kind of what you're doing.
Right.
Filtering and finding. This is another funny thing. So one of my first jobs in New York City, 1983 or 4, I didn't know shit about shit. I was a new kid in New York City. I worked my way up. I was a sous chef at a restaurant called Maurice. Christian Delouvrier was my chef. He's a great guy. He's a great, great, great chef. He was at Les Pinots a while back. Got 4 stars in the Times. He's brilliant. Anyway, we had a guy on the floor. We had a sommelier, which was really an anomaly back then, because there weren't. If you go through the 90s, through the late 90s, really, and you counted the restaurants in New York that had somms on the floor, it was maybe a half a dozen. They didn't exist. It wasn't a job. You trained your wait staff as best you could. Otherwise, you just handed people a wine list and had it happen. And it just so happened that sommelier was Roger Daghorn. I don't know if any of you know who Roger is, but he's like Yoda. Roger is one of the earliest American master somms, passed in the 80s. And he used to wear that test event around his neck, because that was ceremonial in restaurants. And you think of that piece of equipment, right? The point of that sort of ceremonial test event was literally to pour wine into it and to use those little dents to sort of glean how clear the wine was, how clean the wine was, how it was clarified. And now when I'm drinking more and more, which is kind of all I'm drinking is natural wines, and I'm thinking, why the fuck would you want to fine? Why would you want to microfilter? Like, that's what's making this wine alive. So talk about, you've never done that, but leaving those yeast products in the wine, leaving that lees or whatever you want to call it, it's like bacterial microflora that's living. Talk about the importance of that, because to me, I don't know if you noticed that here, but to me, like, now when I go back and drink like more traditional wines, they could be great, they could give me great pleasure, but they might change a little bit from the beginning of the bottle to the end, often not. Often every glass is like a Polaroid of the one that came before it. So they're very precise, they're very accurate, but they're the same. Versus this wine, which just is alive in the bottle and alive in the glass. So talk about that. What's your
Okay,
sense?
so that really leads into a good beginning. So when wine goes into a conventional, when grapes go into a conventional winery, they're crushed, and the first thing they do is add sulfur dioxide.
To kill the yeast.
Kill the
native
yeast. But there's another thing. It kills the natural bacteria. And that's one thing that's not talked about a lot. Lots of times when I go to tastings and a winemaker will come up to me and he says, a conventional winemaker, so you use natural yeast. He said, what do you do about the bacteria? I said, I relish the bacteria. All the things that we do in natural wine production is less things that we have to do. You don't have to take control of the wine. You let the wine go in the way that it's supposed to go. So they add back yeast that can function in a high sulfite solution. So the yeast that are used in natural production, natural wine yeast, can't function in high sulfite solution. So already we're going down a different road. So all those wines in that room, every one of those with the natural yeast is distinct to a place. And if you want to call it terroir, you don't believe in terroir, or whatever the word is you want to use, it's the same thing. It's the same as growing carrots, tomatoes, anything that comes out of the ground and hasn't been manipulated is going to have terroir. We kind of took the word over in the wine business, but everything that is alive has terroir in it. And I think that's really an important point. And I think it's, there's chefs, if they have good, well-grown, naturally organic produce, they don't wash it when it comes into the kitchen, because they don't want to take off that flora and that yeast and that bacteria that's on it. So where are we going with this? I forgot.
No, it's the finding and filtering.
Okay,
Sorry.
All right, so that really goes into it, is that there's yeast that you can use in the winery, like champagne yeast. Champagne yeast is famous for very fast fermentation. It's not you don't have fruity champagnes. They're always kind of yeasty nose. It drops a lot of sediment out. So there's techniques that can be done, but at the same time, by not using the yeast of the vineyard, you're losing that sense of place to it. And then when you get to the point of the finished wine, and you have to make a decision: do I want to put this wine out with the sediment from essentially what the sediment is, and especially red grapes, is the breaking down of the skins. So by taking that out, you're taking out the very essence of what aging is. So the funniest thing that you can see as a winemaker that understands it, the new bottle with the nice punt on the bottom, the punt or the push-up, which has a particular use for the wine clarifying itself when it's in there, and having the screw top on it. So it's like telling people, remember when the punt actually had something to be done with the wine? Because once you put a screw top on it, it's dead. That's finished. That wine will not go any farther than it's going to go when that thing was. So that's a really good point. Filtering and fining. That's what this is about. This punt isn't because it makes the bottle stronger or whatever. This punt is for sediment. So when that bottle's in the rack, and the proper way is to have the air bubble right here. That's why this Bordeaux bottle has shoulders, so that the air bubble can be in there, the sediment falling to this point, and then when you push the bottle up, the sediment hits the punt and settles down. So but then what we did in our need, again, putting stuff in the wine so it doesn't foam, we try to speed things up. So rather than have all that problem with the sediment coming in the bottle, we'll just filter it. We'll take the life out of it so that it's always the same nice. And, in my opinion, the wine making, if there's such a thing, the wine shepherding doesn't end when the person buys the bottle. It ends when you open the bottle. You kind of buy it and accept responsibility for it until it's time to be drunk. That means it doesn't sit on a windowsill somewhere in the kitchen. Oh, that's a nice looking label. That'll kill it. Goes into the right place. Maybe after the wine's drunk, you can play around with the label. But it's a carry through. Just like when you go buy a chicken, you don't just throw the chicken in the back of the car, drive around for a couple days. Hey, thing like that. Same thing with natural wines. They're alive. And your responsibility as a consumer is to take care of it.
Talk to me about varietals. So you started out in the beginning, which isn't surprising, with Zinfandel, which was pretty common out there. What have you expanded to recently in terms of new varietals in the last decade or so, and why?
The one varietal that has really taken my heart is Carignan.
Yeah, your Carignan's delicious.
And Carignan is like the...
Have you had this Carignan? Does anybody here has? Yeah, it's fucking epic.
So in one of the features of old California plantings is called a mixed vineyard. And one of the varietals that was always in a mixed vineyard was Carignan. Carignan, Petit Syrah, Zinfandel, Alicante, some white grapes. You pick them all at the same time, and they all balance themselves off. So I had the great opportunity to make a wine from one of those vineyards. I did it for 20 years, and then anyway, I did it for 20 years, and it was just, you picked it. You couldn't go, you could do it if you wanted to, but you picked it all the way it came, because the person who put that in had a purpose. You know, he knew how much Zin to put in, how much of each one of those to get the balance that would make a particular wine the same every year, or at least give it the same characteristics, and then it would be the season, the weather, that would be the difference between the vintages. So the varietals, I mean, part of the issue that we're having as winemakers is that on one side, the young people coming into drinking is wonderful, because their eyes are, oh God, this is great. But the kind of the negative side, something new, something different. It takes 7 years to get to full production in a vineyard. So something new, something different is like, you know, a Hercules kind of job. So what you have to do is just kind of ride out. You know, Zinfandel in 1985, the farmer said, hey Tony, take my grapes, nobody wants them. And then, you know, 30 years later, they're a premium grape. And that's pretty much what it is. I mean, I love working with new varietals, but at the same time, you're in your appellation, and you're in your weather program, you're in where you're living, and what grapes go well in that. So if they're available to me, I'll take them. But in kind of roundabout way, Carignan to me is like the, I call it my desert island wine. Obviously in the business, I can make any, but I go to my cellar, I've got wines going back to 1963 that I made. But if I had to choose one, it would be Carignan. And I think every good wine list in a restaurant should have a Carignan or two, because it is such a universal grape.
But, you know, I remember Olivier Humbert saying, you know, in a perfect world, I'd love not to use them at all, but because I'm a producer that produces wine to get exported and get shipped around the world, for consistency's sake, I feel like I need that at bottling. Where's the SO2 movement, as far as you could tell, in America?
Well, perfect. A week ago.
What year is this?
A week ago, this was in my cellar.
Right.
No sulfites. So, unsulfited wines don't travel. This was done UPS. This wasn't like handled like a, you know, transplants. You know, this was like, this took the lumps that it took to travel with it. Properly grown grapes with good acidity, there's no problem. You know, and you know, it's funny because I've heard that, what you're saying lots of times. There's young winemakers in California, oh, you know, I have this cuvee that I didn't put any in, and this cuvee that I said, well, why'd you put it in? He goes, you got to protect my investment. So I said, you're going to poison your consumers to protect your investment? And obviously, they can't say anything about it. And when you get to the bottom line, I'm the only producer in California that 100%, at least Northern California, and maybe there's some that I don't know about, 100% of our wines have absolutely nothing added to them, and for 37 years.
It's crazy. Another point, again, traveling in the world of wine and talking to vigneron, there's this great sense, and I get this from everywhere I go, whether it's Cornelius in Italy, or Umbrec in Alsace, or the guys who are doing it on the right bank of Bordeaux, that by not making it a monocrop, by planting cover crops, by getting soil health, by not using, the ability of those vines to sustain stress becomes so much better. They just become healthier individuals. That the more you let them develop that kind of strength, the less they're reliant and the less problems they have. You must have found this out because you guys
Yeah, it's about immune system. That's what goes back to the bacteria. You kill the bacteria, you kill the immune system. You take antibiotics in your system, you're killing your own good guys, and you're going to get sicker. You know, in the big biodynamic world, and when you think about it, the only difference between a tree and a human is the tree can't move around. It has the same issues. I've had vines that, for all intents and purposes, I walk out there and it's dead. So I said, hey, let's dig it up and see what happens. Okay. Hey, Tony, the vine came back. So they have colds, they go through a whole range of things, and if you give them the right nutrients, they're going to be healthy. But that doesn't mean that they're going to just, be like Hercules out there. They're going to go up and down. There are going to be years when they're better than others, but at the same time, they do have that inner strength.
If anybody has any questions, I mean, it's a rare opportunity to get someone who's been on this side of the Atlantic or on any side of the Atlantic who's been doing this since the beginning of time. Anybody have any questions for Tony, you can feel free to raise your hand. I'd be happy to have him go for it.
Well, just one more thing about the bacteria. We all look at the roots. We all grown tomatoes. We have this beautiful root system. And then we put the compost on the vineyard. What's the interaction between essentially the food and the roots? Bacteria. Bacteria digest the food and make it accessible, soluble to the plant. And that's how the plant grows. So the horror, and it is a horror, of the vineyards when they're using the strip spray, when they're putting the Roundup down, they put the Roundup right where the vine lives. The herbicide goes where the vine lives. They don't put it out here, they put it here. So eventually, and not very long, bacteria killed off. And then conventional farmers use, potassium, nitrogen, and phosphorus. They dump it on, and then all of a sudden the vine grows like if you put a kid in a candy store. It'll eat all the nitrogen, it'll eat all the sugar until there's none left. And then it'll go down and up and down. Bacteria, as well as in ourselves in the vineyard, is the regulation. They regulate how much is made available to the plant. And just like our gut, we don't just eat something and it just kind of goes into your hand and then you got strength. It's bacteria, and that's that's why I can say the main difference between the tree and us is that the tree is kind of stuck in the ground,
Right, but same like it's great. Okay, it's hard for me to imagine this. It's again, I'm considering this guy's 37 vintages in an area where he wasn't an outlier for a while. He's still an outlier.
Well, it's so funny because I'm considered a radical winemaker. Who's more conservative than this? Who's doing that? I mean, it really goes to a cultural thing. Americans want to turn the dials. They want to manipulate and change things. And so the hardest thing for us to do is to do nothing. So I always say, if I had a job at a winery, the owner would come in and I'd be sitting on a chair reading a book, and he'd say, "What are you doing?" "Making wine." Because that's what it's about. You wait and see what happens. It's like seeing kids in a nursery in a hospital and say, "Well, there's Einstein and there's Mozart." And no, you got to wait and see what they're going to turn into. You can't push it.
Pioneer. Anybody have any questions? Feel free. It's a rare opportunity to get a guy like Tony in front of you.
Well, back to the comment about Alsace and Zinkenberg, is there, and I don't have enough experience, maybe you can talk about where, perhaps, the 96 that you brought the Zin was showing very beautifully, whatever, but maybe the instances of that having more variability could be linked to less sulfur, let's say. Maybe that's what they were trying to, that there are cases where it's fine, but then there could be more instances where there will be more variability, things doing weird things that people might construe for different palates, that too much VA, re-fermenting and whatnot. So can you kind of talk a little bit about that? Because since you kind of have the most experience on everything.
Well, on one side, we're living in a Mediterranean climate that there's only 7 places in the world like it. So it's very, very favorable to grow grapes there. But on the other side of it is once you make your mind up and you make the decision to go a way, you can't fall back. You have to trust what you're doing and go forward with it. I mean, I don't live in Alsace, so I can't, I don't know what's going on there. I've never been there. But at the same time, it's, in my mind, sulfur is not an option.
And so you've never had a bad batch or release of...
I mean, I've lost wine through negligence, but I've never lost wine because I didn't put sulfur in
And negligent would be storage.
Storage, not topping the barrels up, waiting too long to bottom. I mean, things that could have been mitigated by being more on top of it.
Cleaner in the cellar.
Cleaner in the cellar, not necessarily needing to use sulfite.
I mean, to your point too, I've noticed, again, I started drinking natural wines in sort of the early aughts. And I have to say, when I was, before Severine was at 10 Bells, I remember going there and, they'd be pouring me stuff, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? It's like, it was just like mistakes. Like, to me, there was no pleasure in those wines. You talk about VAs and breaths, they just never blew off, and I was really confused as to why. I mean, I kind of like the concept and the philosophy, but at the end of the day, if wine and food are supposed to be about pleasure, there's nothing pleasurable about drinking a batch of wine that tastes to me like a mistake or a chemistry experiment gone wrong. And what I've seen in the last 10 years, we don't see it in America much because we're not doing it much, but certainly out of the old world, is there's much, much cleaner in the cellar. I think the natural winemakers are just getting much better at what Tony said of figuring out, oops, we screwed up here. It was us. It wasn't the grapes, it wasn't the fact that we're not using SO2, it was this point in the production. We're getting much better at making cleaner, more accurate, more longer lasting natural wines, and I just think that's a function of sort of the newness of the experience and the old, people going back to that in the old world. And I mean, hopefully, do you think it's, I mean, is it catching on here at all? Because in California, you just don't see any.
It's still that whole misunderstanding what SO2 is about. And it's never going to be resolved until somebody just puts the task to them and say, you can't call these natural wines anymore. And that's the problem. Natural wine is meaningless.
Right. U.S. food labeling is pretty much meaningless.
Right.
I mean, wine's one of the few things where you don't have, like you said, there's 200 things that could be in any bottle of wine, and not to mention processing, you'll have to put one thing on the label.
Yeah, so the consumer says, oh, it's good. Not that I agree with it. Oh, it only has SO2, it must be okay. And that's the problem.
Is SO2 your only, I guess, delineation of what natural wine is? Or are things like, I just tasted your current vintage Zinfandel, but it's very sprightly and has a little bit of encapsulated CO2.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, where do you want to draw the line? Do you have a delineation where you say is natural, isn't natural? Is it sulfur? Is it is it racking? Is it, where do you draw the line? And there's some wines we've had here at this fair that are relatively clear, and that's through a lot of racking or whatever. I just draw me the line. Tell me
Chemicals. I mean, nothing added, nothing taken out, and you can do whatever you want from that.
Okay, so you still think we get hand by the winemaker?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's it. I mean, we don't want to make water so that it's the same, everybody's doing the same thing. We want the vineyard to talk, we want the winery to talk, we want the persons that are, I mean, the wine reflects the winemaker. I mean, as much as we don't want to think that, I mean, that's the reality of it. In the little decisions that are made all along that wine's life. So if you had a ton of grapes and I picked them the same day and I have a ton of grapes, but came back in 2 years, they could be very different wines because all the little nuances. But that's what natural wine's about, is the nuances that say, yeah, I did this and I did that and this is what happened. Rather than, well, something happened and I put this in it because I was worried. That's not going back, but going forward and seeing where it's going. Then you don't know where it's going, even though, I mean, so many times in the wine business, and these guys taste every barrel. And, part of it is just having something to do because the owner can't see them sitting on the chair reading the book,
Yeah.
which they should be doing. So they're tasting the wines, and the wines are like children. Every day they're different. One day you taste them and you go, oh my God, this thing is gone. What happened? Come back the next day and it's gorgeous. And that's, back and forth, and then that gets farther and farther, and pretty soon the intervals get longer and longer. You got a 20-year-old bottle of wine, it's going to be pretty consistent. But it takes time to get to that point. So yeah, I mean, I relish that individual, that varietal, that variety that people will bring to their wine. But you've got to just say, hey, this is food. I mean, Michael, put some MSG in your food. It would be so much better. I mean, I've gone to natural wine bars and I put the wine on the table. This wine would be better if you put sulfur in it. I mean, you can't kill the guy, right? So I just said, all right. But how could someone tell you that?
Right.
You'd be better off taking antibiotics. You'd be better off putting MSG in your food. Why? This is the way it is. This is the way it is.
Well, he's about as pure as it gets, too. This is something I think the whole natural wine movement is wrestling with today.
Yeah.
But Isabel did this when she's been doing the New York, when she decided to come, like what, I mean, so she has 70 parts per million for SO2. You've got to be below that threshold. So I think everyone in this space now is wrestling with this same question you're asking.
I mean, 70 parts per million is like a lot. My threshold for taste is between 10 and 15. Most good wines are at 40 parts at bottling.
What are you finding the wines that are naturally producing the sulfates? Just without any addition?
Yeah, that's a great question, you know, and I really grappled with that my whole career. And so I was working with a kind of a guy that took some chemistry classes, so we said, we're going to do an experiment. We're going to take, when the grapes came in, as soon as they're crushed, we're going to take the juice and freeze it. And then when the wine's made, we're going to get the wine tested and then the grape juice tested, because the sulfur didn't come in. They're saying, oh, the sulfur comes in from the yeast. Well, maybe it did, maybe let's find out. So if there's no sulfur in the grape juice and there's sulfur in the final wine, then something produced it. And it just so happened we did 5 different wines that vintage, and they all came out, the wine came out with none detectable, so there wasn't any reason, obviously, to test the juice for SO2. It seems to me that the higher, the rates, the variability of SO2 has to do with the stress of the vintage. The more stress that the vine's under, it tends to produce more SO2. We're talking minuscule amount. We're talking people that if people really have a true SO2 allergy, that if they drank a bottle of wine that had like over 10 or 11 parts per million, they would be in the emergency room. I mean, not feel ill, it takes them to their knees. So I've had wines at 6 or 7 parts per million naturally occurring, and no one, I always tell them, if you do have an allergy, just take a sip. Don't drink a bottle and see what happens. I've never been a reaction to it. So I think it's like taking wine and it makes a certain amount of alcohol, then adding more to it, you know, as opposed to this is what it naturally has. This is what, there's other balances within the wine that's going to balance that SO2 out. And once you raise the level, you destroy the ability to get that balance. But that's, you know, total conjecture, and that's just me talking on top of my head. But.
Question in the back.
Tony, you said that winemakers will keep using SO2 until someone says, no, you can't do this to make a natural wine. Mind you, the French winemakers have been battling AOCs for so long, and in America we have so many government controls over what is natural and what's not that are complete bullshit. Do you actually want someone to step in and say, this is natural wine and actually regulate it, or?
That's a great question, because first of all, you can't have wine, just natural wine. Wine has to have an appellation and a varietal. It has to come from someplace. You know, if it's coming from Napa or if it's coming from Tuscany, it has to come from someplace to start with. And then it has to have the varietals that grow there, and then it has to be made naturally. So, you know, I understand what you're saying, and that's exactly, this is a great category right now because it's getting us introduced to it, but eventually it's going to have to come to what wine's about. Wine's about where the wine comes from, where the grapes are grown. So, you know, that's the beginning of it, is that you'll have these wines coming from this place, and oh, by the way, they're using natural yeast and they're chemical free. So yes, I mean, you know, as far as I understand in Europe, it's an accepted category. They say, you can go into a wine shop that has the coolers and say, this is natural wine, go across the street and have conventional wines. I think that's really the key to it, is us as adults to have choices. Not so much all the wine should be made this way. You know, I don't care. I don't care how you do it, but just tell me what you're doing. If you're putting chemicals in it, be proud of it. Say, yeah, this is what I'm doing because I think I should. But if you say, well, you know, I'm protecting my investment, I don't understand that. I mean, then you're in the wrong business. You should be oil wells or something. You know, if you're looking for money, I mean, the same thing with food. What are you going to say? Well, I had to do this because I put that food out and that fish was getting a little old. No, I mean, really, if what's going on in a lot of wineries was going on in his kitchen, he'd be out of work. He'd be gone. They wouldn't allow it. They'd say, what are you doing? You can't do that. But we get away with it in my industry because, first of all, it's not FDA. It's the only thing that controls us is taxes, not quality. which is a good thing and a bad thing, because if it was FDA, I'd be out of business. I mean, you can't even put a hose on the ground. Well, you know the regulations for it. So, it's a good thing for me, but at the same time, it opens up this whole door. It's a free-for-all.
Anybody else? It's getting near the hour.
What about like, there are only certain wines that have ingredients, on the back of the label. Why don't more people do that? And then to pour it to
Well, you can do it. I mean, you can do it if you want to. I mean, mine would just say grapes. So I mean, this is really true. I have a little thing in the back of my label that says, we only use, this and that. Well, it's right here. Coturri says uses only naturally occurring yeast, no chemicals, additives, or preservatives are added. So I've used that for years and years and years. And every time I make a new wine, I have to put a new label and get it approved. The government said, by you saying that, you're somehow implying that the other people are making bad wine because they're not making it like you. You got to change it. I said, oh, okay. I have a woman that does compliance for me. She said, all right, that's fine. How many labels have you approved from Coturri that say that? Well, just the last one, right? 300 of them. Literally 300 of them. So they said, no. Okay, you win. And then I won a little one for us. Frank Carnielsen tried to put on his label, this wine is made without the use of any mechanical means. That implies that the people that do use mechanical means aren't making good wine, so you can't use that. So you had to fight that war too. I mean, so if I use a crusher stemmer and Carnielsen doesn't, it's still natural wines. That's my choice as a winemaker. But the choice doesn't go to the fact of putting sulfite in the wine. That's where the choice is at.
Thanks so much, man, American hero right here.